Hello and welcome. You're watching India First. I'm Gaurav Sawant. Big day. Terror financer Yasin Malik has been convicted and sentenced to a life in prison and 2 sentences. So he will spend the rest of his living years in prison. He confessed to his crimes. What does this mean for action against terrorists and self-confessed Gandhians? It's a big story that we're tracking here on India Today. In parts of Srinagar, internet has been shut down. Security forces are on high alert and Pakistan is very upset. First, as always, we start with the headlines. NIA court sentences Yasin Malik to a life in prison, found guilty under UPA charge 7, including waging war against India and terror financing. The entire nation is moved by the plight of 9-year-old Safa in Kashmir. Terrorists killed her father, Constable Saifullah Qadri, and shot and injured. Her anger erupts over targeted killings of innocents by Pakistan-sponsored radical Islamist terrorists. Another huge setback to the Gandhis. 2-time union minister and veteran Congress leader Kapil Sibal dumps the Congress, files Rajya Sabha nomination on the Samajwadi Party ticket. After the Central Bureau of Investigation, the Enforcement Directorate books former Finance Minister's son Karti Chidambaram for alleged money laundering in the Chinese visa scam. A teenage armed shooter kills 19 children, 2 teachers in a horrific Texas school shooting. US President Joe Biden calls for fresh curbs on firearms. A Delhi court on Wednesday awarded life in prison to terror financer and Jammu and Kashmir Liberation Front chief Yasin Malik in multiple terror funding cases. An NIA court found Yasin Malik guilty on 7 charges under the Unlawful Activities Prevention Act. Yasin Malik had pleaded guilty to all charges related to terror funding, spreading terrorism and secessionist activities in the Kashmir Valley in 2017-18 after the killing of terrorist Burhan Wani. He took money, Yasin Malik took money from Pakistani terrorists, including UN designated global terrorist Hafiz Mohammad Saeed and Syed Salahuddin, to burn schools in the Kashmir Valley and foment unrest.
It has taken decades, but justice is finally done. Jammu and Kashmir Liberation Front chief and terrorist involved in many attacks in the valley, Yasin Malik gets life imprisonment in a terror funding case. An NIA court in Delhi has found the JKLF leader guilty of 7 charges under the Unlawful Activities Prevention Act. The court has also imposed 10 lakh rupees fine on Malik.
On 18th of April, I was appointed as an amicus curiae. As on that day, in the Honorable Court, the Yasin Malik says that he don't want to contest the trial as he is ready to plead the guilty for the offences for which he is charged. I met him, Yasin Malik, twice in a Tihar jail, where I tried to convince him to rethink about his decision of pleading guilty. And today the matter was fixed for the argument on sentence, in which the Honorable Court has convicted him under 121 IPC and 17 UAPA, life imprisonment along with 10 lakh fine under Section 17 UAPA Act.
Ahead of the verdict, Malik's supporters gathered outside his house in Srinagar and started sloganeering. The police had to fire tear gas to disperse the protesters and restore normalcy.
जो इन पर और केसेस है हत्याओं के या माहौल वहां पर खराब करने के, पाकिस्तान के इशारों पर काम करने के, किसी का अपहरण किया, किसी को मारा गया, ये सब ये जो अपराध हैं जब साबित होंगे तो निश्चय ही इससे भी सख्त सजा होनी ही चाहिए. तो अभी टेरर फंडिंग का और हवाले का मामला है.
Malik had pleaded guilty to charges related to terror funding, spreading terror and secessionist activities in the Kashmir Valley in 2017. Malik is also accused of attacking Kashmiri Pandits and killing 4 Indian Air Force personnel in the valley. Nirmal Khanna, the wife of the slain squadron leader Ravi Khanna, who Yasin Malik allegedly killed, called the verdict a big win and added that Yasin should also be convicted for her martyr husband's murder.
एक ही प्रेसिडेंट बनाना चाहिए, एक कानून बनाना चाहिए. जैसे इतने कानून बने हैं, उसमें कानून जो है देश विद्रोह में जो कानून है उनको थोड़ा सा हटके और कड़े तरीके से तैयार करना चाहिए, ताकि आने वाली जनरेशंस को ये मैसेज जाए कि हमने देश हित में खड़े होना है, देश द्रोह के लिए हमें अपने आप को तैयार नहीं करना.
Malik is also facing trial for the kidnapping of Rubaiya Saeed, daughter of the then Union Home Minister Mufti Muhammad Saeed, in December 1989. Rubaiya was freed in exchange for 5 terrorists. Among the first homegrown terror leaders of Kashmir, Malik has lost clout in the valley over the last few decades. With Kamaljeet Sandhu in New Delhi, Sunilji Bhatt in Jammu, and Ashraf Wani in Srinagar, Bureau Report, India Today.
The fakery of the Gandhian non-violent protest of a terror financer, Yasin Malik, stood exposed with his conviction by a special NIA court in the national capital. For decades after allegedly abducting Rubaiya Saeed, the daughter of then Union Home Minister Mufti Muhammad Saeed, and the killing of 4 Indian Air Force personnel in cold blood, Yasin Malik claimed to be a Gandhian while consorting with a UN-designated global terrorist Hafiz Saeed to burn the valley. Joining me on India First is Peer Vikarul Aslam, a political analyst and activist from the Kashmir Valley. Ravinder Raina, the BJP president of Jammu and Kashmir, will join us in a moment. I also have with me SP Vaid, former Director General of the Jammu and Kashmir Police. But Peer, I want to ask you first. Is the mask of a non-violent Gandhian of Yasin Malik not only confessed to taking funds from Pakistan from a UN-designated global terrorist like Hafiz Saeed to spread terror in Kashmir, he actually stands convicted now?
Well, I would like to begin with these 2 lines from the Urdu poetry. Mera qatil hi mera munsif hai, kya mere haq mein faisla dega? This is the same Yasin Malik from the Haji group who returned and was involved in armed struggle here. But then he chose the path of non-violence and surrendered along with his associates, almost 500 of them.
The armed struggle is called terrorism. Armed struggle is called terrorism, my friend.
That's your terminology. Well, let's use neutral terminologies. I am a political analyst. I don't take sides, or you as a journalist should not as well.
So Kashmir is not an integral part of India according to you?
Sir, let me answer the Yasin Malik question first. And about the integral part, if India considers this as an integral part, BJP government would not disrupt peace. Every time there is prolonged peace in Kashmir, after Article 370, this was the first day where stone pelting happened in the heart of the city. That's Mysuma. We saw relative peace in last season, and we had quite a good tourist footfall here. But now BJP doesn't want it because elections are near. For their agenda, they will start cherry picking issues that would, create some hassle in the public life here. We have internet shutdown. For this connection to establish, I had to travel from my home 4 kilometers to reach a Wi-Fi point. So my point here is that BJP does not want peace in Kashmir.
Okay.
As long as it is in center, it will start calling all Kashmiris separatists or terrorists. Well, it was the BJP's Vajpayee Sahab, the PM, who, shook hands with Yasin Malik and tried to establish peace. For BJP, whenever it is convenient, Yasin Malik is a peacemaker. When it's not, he's a terrorist and he should be convicted.
So, no, I'm trying to understand. I'm trying to understand from you. I heard your monologue for quite some time. For you, Yasin Malik is all Kashmir. Is it an armed terrorist with a gun, or somebody who the court has convicted with evidence that he did not reform, he did not regret killing people, and that he continued to spread terror even though he claimed to be a Gandhian? For none of that matters, some agenda matters. Fair enough. Let me bring in Ravinder Raina of the Bharatiya Janata Party. Ravinder Raina, the BJP is being accused of turning the valley into a tinderbox. First Article 370 and now prosecution and conviction of Yasin Malik to suit a political agenda. Response, sir.
It is not the BJP that has disrupted the peace in Kashmir Valley. It is the Pakistan and Pakistani sponsored terrorism that created bloodbath in Kashmir. It is the Pakistan and the Pakistani sympathizers, Pakistani supporters and the terrorists. Those are responsible for the chaos, mess, terrorism, bullets, bombs and the killing of the innocent peoples in Kashmir Valley. It is not the BJP that is responsible for the strikes and the
respond to Peer Vikar, sir. Respond to Peer Vikar when he says Vajpayee as Prime Minister, Atal Bihari Vajpayee engaged with these separatists / terrorists. You engage when it's convenient, you convict when it's convenient.
Not at all. It is not the BJP that convicted them. It is the Honorable Court, NIA Court, having the evidences, they sentenced the life imprisonment to Yasin Malik. He is punished for his crimes. And BJP has always shown the zero tolerance. It was the Congress government. It was the former Prime Minister Sri Manmohan Singh ji and Srimati Sonia Gandhi ji. Those were having the repeated meetings and sittings with the Yasin Malik, and they were having the biryani at their dining tables. Not once, for many times.
Let me bring
in the Congress leadership.
Let
Those
me bring
were
in
always dancing on the tones of Pakistanis.
Okay, that's a big point. That's a big point you're raising.
Very strong measures. Operation All Out. Forces were given free hand to deal with Pakistani terrorism, and we have neutralized, our forces have neutralized the top commanders of the terrorist outfits.
And yet Valley remains on the edge.
Yasin Malik,
sir, yet Valley remains on the edge. Give me a moment.
Can I respond to
yes,
Mr.
but I want to bring in Mr. Vaid for a moment.
Right.
Mr. Vaid, is Yasin Malik this fake Gandhian? Is he finally exposed, or has the central government put Kashmir on the edge again, as Peer Vikar seems to allege?
Gaurav, please don't insult the father of the nation, Gandhiji, by associating his name with the terrorist. That, I think, will be taken offense of by everyone, not only me, everyone in this country and across the world. Number two, the crimes you commit here haunt you not only in this life, even the life after this. And you have killed in public view 4 Indian Air Force men. You have kidnapped Rubaiya Sayed. You know the significance of that? 5 terrorists were exchanged. A mighty government of India was brought to its knees. The whole Kashmir that time felt this. So it was a huge, huge crime against the nation. And then the genocide of Kashmiri Pandits. I don't want to count how many of them were butchered. So one has to answer for the crimes one commits.
Okay.
You may surrender, doesn't mean your crimes are banished. I commit murders and then I say I surrender my arms, or I become Gandhi, I have changed my my path. Does that absolve me of my crimes? So one has to be answerable to the law and the law of the land. I'm glad that it is being applied. The law of land is showing.
Self-styled Gandhi. I mean, you know, he calls himself Gandhi. Another separatist calls himself Nelson Mandela, and yet they continue to foment trouble. And Peer Vikar, that's the point I'm coming to. Pakistan, that was funding Yasin Malik to burn this valley, is very upset. If a terror financer stands convicted, why are some elements in Jammu and Kashmir upset? Because charges were framed against him, even for abducting Rubaiya Saeed, a fellow Kashmiri. And he's an under trial in the killing of 4 Indian Air Force personnel. एक आतंकी के लिए पीर इतनी हमदर्दी क्यों?
See, I don't have any sympathy for anybody here. I am just spitting facts at this. Let's ask Mr. Ravinder Raina, why did PM Modi go to Pakistan? Because PM Modi as well wanted peace, right? So you engage these players that you are convicting now. Why did it take you so long to convict Yasin Malik after the surrender? So this raises a question, and people of India should ask, why did it take 30 long years? So what I am saying is, it should not be selective, and there should be, if the law is fair and independent, I think most of the BJP ministers would be behind bars. Hindu Mahasabha activists should be, arrested. Similarly, Shiv Sena leaders who have committed crimes against humanity. I am
produce
saying
evidence,
is if the government has decided to
take action in courts of law. I mean, you may say this in some madrasa, you may say this at a political rally, but at least on India Today, speak facts, sir. On India Today, I would appreciate it if you speak facts and not rhetoric. I've heard this rhetoric for decades in the valley. Kashmiris need to wake up and smell the coffee and realize the world has moved on. How long will you echo Pakistan ISI and ISPR lines? That's what I want to understand. But I also want to bring in Ravinder Raina. And Ravinder Raina, Peer Vikar is asking a very fair question. Here was a terrorist who killed Indian Air Force personnel, who abducted the Home Minister's daughter and brought the country down to its knees. And yet, this country, called him a Gandhian for 3 decades before finally convicting him. And thank God for that.
No. He is a terrorist. Some people in Kashmir Valley, those are having sympathies with the killers, murderers, and the Pakistanis. They called him Gandhian. He is not a Gandhian. He is a terrorist who himself admitted, even in the NIA court, that he received huge amount of money from Pakistan, Hawala transaction, to carry forward the agenda of Pakistan to kill the innocent people in Kashmir. Even he, in an interview with the BBC, he admitted that he is responsible for the killing of 4 Indian Air Force Jawans. He is a terrorist. He is not a Gandhian. All those who called him the Gandhian are the sympathizers and the supporters of Pakistan. They are the anti-national forces. Those are just trying to shield the terrorists. Those are the killer of people of Kashmir.
Okay. I am short on time. I have to go, but let me end this on this note here. If there are less number of people that support the separatism here or are supporters of Yasin Malik, why has been internet shut down in entire Srinagar right now? Why is entire Srinagar turned into a garrison right now? There is patrolling, there is so much security forces on the ground.
To save the lives of innocent people.
Just cordon off Maisuma, his
to save the lives of innocent people, as the anti-national forces are trying to instigate the common Kashmiris against the country. There is a propaganda on the social media from the Pakistani side. Videos are being circulated. That's why, to prevent destroying the life of innocent Kashmiris, the government has taken this decision.
Ranaji, with utmost respect, since 2019, are you trying to say that your government here has not been able to contain militancy? So we cannot live freely, I cannot go right now anywhere I want? Are you trying to say that you have failed? Your Home Minister on the floor of Parliament said that there will be
your Home Minister, is he not your country's Home Minister? I want to understand what kind of mindset is this, Vikar? Is he not your country's Home Minister?
Sir, my president was APC Salam. I do not subscribe to BJP's hotline opinion.
No, but do you consider Kashmir an integral part of this country? Do you consider Kashmir?
Amit Shah is the Home Minister. Do I have to respect him for that?
Do you accept Kashmir is an integral part of this country?
Sir, I do not have respect for designations.
No,
I have respect for characters.
Sir, you are not answering a very direct question I'm asking you, because it is time that intelligentsia in Kashmir is also asked certain questions, because there's a terror enabling ecosystem that has survived for far too long, and that ecosystem needs to be questioned now. So tell me, sir, do you consider Jammu and Kashmir an integral part of India?
I am here in a professional capacity as a political analyst. I do not have to answer that question. And you don't have to ask me such questions.
Really? I have to ask you, sir. I ask everybody this question, sir. I asked this question. I know I'm not a part of that ecosystem, that Ghulam Nabi file, Ghulam Nabi file sponsored ecosystem that calls, Yasin Malik or Sahab kaise aap Sahab and hang on to every word that terrorists utter. No, sir. We will ask hard questions, sir.
We have doubts about us. Are you doubting a Kashmiri? That's why you
Oh, I am not doubting every Kashmiri, and I'm sorry, sir. You may play this victimhood card elsewhere, but not here. Do not play a victim card, at least not on India First. But Mr. Ved, and Vikas, stay on. I request you to stay on. Do not play a victim card, sir. This country is as much yours as it is mine, and Kashmir is as much mine as it is yours. But Mr. Ved, this narrative building. Correct. This narrative building, this ecosystem, it remains a cause for concern. If a terror financer is convicted, this narrative is built that the government is trying to destabilize Kashmir, when it is actually Pakistan that is trying to destabilize Kashmir.
Gaurav, this is the tragedy. My friends in Kashmir must understand that ultimately the sufferer are the people who are living in Kashmir. Not only the families of 4 Air Force officers are waiting for justice, including the families of Kashmiri Pandits who were butchered and who faced genocide. They are waiting for justice for last 32 years, more than that. And I think the whole criminal justice system, including investigation, prosecution and judiciary, owes a explanation to the victims' families. Yes. And apart from that, one should, my friends in Kashmir must understand, by terror funding, what was Yasin doing? He was instigating young boys to join terrorist ranks, indulge in stone pelting, as a result provoke the security forces to open fire. So many families have been
such willing stooges of Pakistan state-sponsored terror.
Yes,
it is bizarre.
So many families have lost their young boys.
Absolutely. What level of radical Islamist terror is this? I mean,
many schools and panchayat ghars were burnt.
Absolutely.
So many bridges were burnt.
Ravinder Rena, there's a fair point. There's a fair point that Peer Vikar was raising. For so many years, your government and before your government, other governments. I mean, we've been a democracy. We're celebrating 75 years of India's independence. And yet Pakistan, a state sponsor of terror, a radical Islamist country, remains so relevant in Kashmir. Somewhere down the line, all governments have failed, sir.
See, our government has taken very bold decisions in Jammu and Kashmir. The abrogation of Article 370 and the extending and implementation of all the central laws. Those are now applicable in Jammu and Kashmir. It is because of abrogation of Article 370 and because of Modi government. Second thing, our government has given the clear directions to the forces. No mercy against the killers of democracy. No mercy against terrorists. Operation All Out, which is being carried out massively. All the top terror commanders have been neutralized by Jammu and Kashmir Police and Indian Army.
Sir, that is why these hybrid terrorists are coming, and these hybrid terrorists are also a cause for great concern. Yeah, but you know the point that our friend from Kashmir was raising.
They have shifted, Gauravji.
Yeah, I've last 30 seconds on the broadcast, but I want to ask Mr. Ved. Mr. Ved, is there an apprehension that there could be violence in Jammu and Kashmir? Will this give a new lease of life? Because that cyclical violence that had stopped after action on Article 370 and more important, after the bombing of Balakot, is there an apprehension that Pakistan could use this and once again try and burn Kashmir?
See, I don't think people of Kashmir would be much concerned accepting his area of stronghold like Maisma and Koti Bagh area, and the small area, and that has been, whenever we used to arrest him, that was the area where stone pelting would resort to, and there is a very minor thing that could be controlled, not an issue. But yes, Pakistan would explain, because Pakistan is co-conspirator.
Yes.
The terror funding was coming from somebody was asking, why is Pakistan so rattled? They would be rattled. He was their stooge. If money from Hafiz Sayyid and Salahuddin was coming, it is not without the consent of the deep state of Pakistan.
Okay.
So obviously, My personal view is, in fact, the DG ISI should have been the co-accused in this case.
Oh, absolutely.
It cannot happen without his consent.
Including in 26/11 Mumbai terror attacks and Pathankot and Pulwama terror strikes, because it can't happen without the active connivance of Pakistan DG ISI. I've run out of time on this part of the show, but Ravinder Raina, it's your government's responsibility to ensure action against terrorists and the terror-enabling ecosystem is taken to its logical conclusion. For joining me here on India First, Mr. S.P. Ved, Ravinder Raina and Pir Vikarul Aslam, many thanks.